Hello, I'm Nila Chakraborty. Welcome to SBW Talks, where strong women have real talk, share real stories, and keep it all the way real. This is the space where we drop the masks, unpack the layers, and speak from the heart. No filters, no fluff, just raw, honest conversations. It's my absolute pleasure to introduce Mir Masood Elias, who goes by Mir, who's originally from Dhaka, Bangladesh. She is a counsel at Arnold and Porter LLP in Washington, D.C. She holds a master's in bioethics from UPenn, a JD from Columbia University School of Law, and a BA in English and Physics from Amherst College and California Institute of Technology, or Caltech. A truly accomplished individual who also has an artistic, poetic side to her. She is a poet whose aspiration is to challenge essentialist notions of what South American immigrant narratives can be. She has published poems in collected editions and journals and written essays for a Leeway Foundation grant funded food blog. She is the recipient of the 2021 William Carlos Williams Peregrine Prize from the American Academy of Poets and the 2022 Universe in Verse Prize from the Kelly Writers House at UPenn, and a previous host and a curator of the quarterly 12G Poetic Circle at 12 Gates Arts. She is in the process of wrapping up the manuscript of her debut poetry collection titled Infinite Body. Thank you, Mir. Welcome to SBW Talks and giving us your time.
Thank you, Nila, for inviting me and for that very generous introduction. I'm not sure I did all of those things.
Oh, you did. You did. What we want to ask you is, you grew up from Dhaka, Bangladesh until you were 17 years old. Looking back, how was your upbringing influenced your values that guide your personal life as well as your professional life and your creative pursuits today?
Well, it was a long time ago, so I'm going to try and remember as best as I can. I recall being a very quiet and sensitive girl. I'm the middle children of three in a family, and my parents got married very young and had us very young. Dhaka at the time was a very quiet, bucolic city, unlike the Dhaka it is today. And I was, since I was sort of very attuned to my senses, looking back now, the sensory and the social sort of richness, chaos, colors, contradictions, what we all know about India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, all of that left an imprint. I don't think I appreciated it all back then as a kid, but being more into my comic books and cartoons and TV shows, always adventure shows, but it definitely left an imprint. So I had a congenital childhood condition. I'm cured of it now, but I'm glad they found it early. And so I was sort of treated by everyone very gingerly. I'm a 5'2" now, so I was a very petite girl. So often I wasn't allowed to participate in sports and be outside very much, but I somehow found an opportunity to sneak out and play with the boys in the courtyard, or in my apartment complex, or play with all the kids in school outside. So in a way, I sort of never let that hold me back. And again, thanks to that condition, there's a little lesson there, I think. Everything sort of that was adverse helped me push beyond that and try to see, okay, people tell me I'm not, my body is not quite right. How do I overcome that, if that makes any sense? And I'm not saying I did it intentionally as a kid, but as a kid, my natural impulse was, why not? Why shouldn't I go out and play just like everybody else? As I said, my parents were very young. They were always busy, my dad at work and my mom at home. She never sort of sat down and rested. And so in a way, they had very little time for us. This is not uncommon for those of us who are Gen X, all across the world. We'll have the same story about our parents. I don't think my parents were any different. And unfortunately, often because they married young and, went through the various seasons of their lives, they did not get along well with each other often. So I immersed myself in books. They were my friends, and learned about all the possibilities the world has to offer. I also had an early exposure to the work of folks like Stephen Hawking and Carl Sagan. And so then my natural aptitude for the sciences pushed me to apply to universities in the US. So that's sort of how the journey to the US started. And much as I loved my family and Bangladesh, as a slightly offbeat teenager, I sort of didn't see a future for myself there. Part of my upbringing emphasized home and hearth, right? Eventually getting married and having children, having a family, which is wonderful. But I pretty much convinced myself early on that that wasn't for me. To give you an example, Nila, about how silly and naive I was like, I got a full ride to Caltech at 17. I'm going to go to the US and I'm going to become an astronaut, even though I get violently seasick, car sick, and I'm sure I'd be space sick, right? But that's how naive I was. But I think that there was this intense desire, and I don't think it's just because I'm from Bangladesh or I'm a girl or something, or South Asian, or it's my family. I just had an intense desire to escape my materially comfortable circumstances and just start my life's adventure. I just couldn't wait to start. So I would say looking back, I thank my parents for not holding me back or ever making me feel like I was less in any way because I was this petite framed girl.
I think you pave your own future by yourself, and I give you credit because in certain circumstances, people kind of whine and, not be happy with it. But here you're like, listen, I have to get out of this situation. I have to pave my own future. I have to do this. It was all from within you.
But I 100% agree with you. Now I've been here more than half my life that we're all pushed, be your individual self. You can do everything, realize your potential. And all of that is true. Right? This was a voice from within. There was just this drive. But everyone should listen to their inner voice or figure out a way to emphasize that inner voice when the outward world is always trying to drown it in some way. My inner voice sort of led me to these things. Other people's would lead them to other things, And even though those adventures may seem quieter on the outside, rest assured, they're still sort of paving their way in the world.
You made your success by you. No one helped you do that. You have to acknowledge that you had a vision of where you wanted to be and you had a goal set and you met those goals. It's very hard being, as we were discussing our conversation, being a triple minority, being an immigrant, being a woman, and then especially at this times, being a Muslim woman and from Bangladesh. And look at where you are right now. And you're in like Washington, D.C. at a law firm.
And we'll talk about some of my transitions. I would not, even 2 years ago, I would say, back to private practice after a great job at the University of Pennsylvania. I don't think so. But we shall have, that's fruit for the next half of our conversation, right?
Yeah, I think you are a representation of a lot of immigrant women, not just from Bangladesh, but people who also have come from other backgrounds that
Exactly.
if you have confidence within yourself, you can do it. Your parents are there just as guidance or as a background, but if you can push yourself like just as you did, you can get to many places. You just need the perseverance.
And I want to emphasize, you're a parent, right? You're a parent to two kids. The kind of what you set them up with in life, the stability, the guidance, that is valuable. And yes, I did have that. If I didn't have material stability, then I would never have been able to, spring from that to something else. So I do want to acknowledge that of all the hard work, and I would say whoever the primary caregiver in the family is, all the hard work they have to do. And the person who is not the primary caregiver in the South Asian circumstance that I grew in, it's the father who is sort of outside working. My dad worked like the kinds of hours people work today at an executive job. So I want to acknowledge all of that, but you're absolutely right. At the end of the day, it is you, it is your life. Your life's purpose is your life's purpose, and no one can help you get there other than yourself.
Right, absolutely. So tell me, how was that transition from coming from Bangladesh and coming to the United States?
Well, I would say, thank goodness I was a very young person. It would have been better if I were younger. I applaud people who travel and emigrate here at a later stage in their lives. So 17 was a good age. I was born and raised in Bangladesh, as you know, but I always talk about how I came of age and finished growing up here, and that it was exhilarating. I won't deny it, right? It's everything I had watched and read about, and here it was. And it was disorienting at the same time. Dhaka is tropical and humid, Bangladesh in general, like right near one of the tropics, to Southern California, where Caltech was, sunny and dry. And then I eventually transferred to Amherst College in Western Massachusetts, other side of the coast, this side. Rural, quiet, snow-covered. But at Caltech, I was sort of as a nerd, I was in nerd heaven. I was with other nerds, right? But there too, girls were in the minority because it was a predominantly male environment. However, I really started finding my tribe of people. My tribe of people are the offbeats, the outcasts, the rejects, the people who see the world upside down. I know I don't appear that way, and many of my friends and colleagues would be surprised that I describe myself or think of myself that way, but that is who I am, and I found my tribe there. I saw that there was lyricism and mystery in mathematics and pure sciences, right? That's what I was drawn to, thanks to, as I mentioned, Carl Sagan and Stephen Hawking. But then there was also the internal logic of creative writing and expression, how to take the human condition and actually, which is our reality, right? And boil it down into a different reality, the reality of words. So I discovered Toni Morrison, James Baldwin, and other great American writers of conscience, right? So my politicization in terms of how I was going to be in this world, particularly in the United States, and also looking back at the circumstances I came from in Bangladesh, started by sort of reading and learning. A whole set of other sort of literature became available that I wasn't exposed to while I was in Bangladesh. I happened to come, I didn't tell you this, family of stage actors and directors on my mother's side, and had learned Odissi classical Indian dance as a young person. And so I was sort of I figured out that at an American university, you can study, you can also be in plays and sing in a choir. I did all of those things. I'm not particularly good at any of those other things. I'm good at the academics. I'm sort of moderate to average in the other things, but I could explore all of that. So candy store, so to speak, for me intellectually and physically. Eventually I decided I wanted to focus on the humanities full time. And so I transferred to Amherst College out in Western Massachusetts. So there were all these small cultural shifts. There's a culture shock coming here. The West Coast has a very different culture than the East Coast. The East Coast felt a lot more familiar to me in many ways. And just, not that there's anything wrong with the West Coast, it just is even further from my sort of experiences, if you will. And I have spent most of my time here in the years. But at any rate, I'm sad to say, looking back, that I didn't feel like I had any true mentors or guides in those early years. So I think it's very important for people like us, Nila, to always be that way, and not just for your own children, but for any young people who come your way and seems to want some sort of advice, guidance, or wants to hear a story or two. So at any rate, after graduating with an English Lit degree, which is very relatively useless, and unsure where to go, I chose law and was lucky enough to be admitted to Columbia Law School in New York. And law helped bridge these two, the right, left side of my brain, if you will. There's analytical clarity and a sort of quantitative sort of precision that's needed, but also it requires language, because the law ultimately is about human experience and the human condition and how to sort of structure and organize within a certain setting in society. So I sort of, in some ways, it really fed the legal creative, sort of the creative part of my brain and the analytical part of my brain. And the lens of law and creative writing over the years, I've noticed, has helped me become a politicized person. You know, we don't see that the scaffolding, this is my opinion, the scaffolding of injustice in this world, like that's what the world is built upon. In the US and Bangladesh, and frankly in every society everywhere. And our first job when we're younger is to at least start seeing that's the case. Now what are you going to do with it is up to you. For meant working towards at least becoming more self-aware about how things actually work in society, who's placed where, who gets where, who doesn't get what, and then try to do something about it in my own small way. At Amherst, Massachusetts, the solitude, I was very lonely. And sometimes that solitude was very freeing and liberating. I am a person who does thrive in solitude, but at times it was very alienating. So I remember learning to sort of hold silence differently, learning how to explain where I came from without like flattening it into a stereotypical experience. There were just so many incidents, but those first few years made me resilient. I almost forget today because in my current profession, I have to project and talk a lot, right? Like just to keep up with the other lawyers. But I've also learned the value of pause, and pause and silence. Those are the moments of reflection and awareness. And they're both essential in sort of writing, leading, listening, exactly like what you're doing right now. If everybody could be a good listener, this world would be a different place. It's very hard for me to remember those days, but sometimes, and I'm not sure if you have felt this, but sometimes you're treated like an exotic sort of alien creature by your peers, and then sometimes you're completely ignored. So I had trouble in those early years in my 20s and 30s to figure out what my place was going to be. What would normalcy mean for me? And I was very lucky, I would say, in those early years early 20s, that despite my desire never to be partnered and take on the immense responsibility of raising children in this uncertain world, again, I applaud you, Nila, I found a gem of a companion, my husband, in my early years. And we've now been married for almost half my life. So through making a home with him and our dogs, who we adore as our closest family members, I started sort of carving out a domestic space for myself, a haven, and that has been immensely rich and fulfilling for my internal life. And that is what sort of helps me be resilient to face the outer world and its challenges.
So, Mir, coming from such an academic background, academia, from Caltech to Amherst and then to Columbia, how has poetry helped you and defined you? Because that's a whole new space of creativity.
So here's my deep dark secret. When I was a little girl, I wrote a lot of bad poetry, and no one asked me to write it. I just had this green notebook, and I just filled it. I wrote poems up to my mom, about my mom, about my sister, about my teacher, a lot of bad poetry. So I always like to just write and tell stories to myself. And then I sort of set it aside. You're right. I pursued these other goals. And then during the pandemic, I was still working at the University of Pennsylvania. When you're a staff member, when you're a lawyer member there, you can take classes for free. And there were poetry classes and creative writing classes being offered online. Everything was on Zoom. And that helped. So I was like, why don't I take a creative writing class and see if I can write a little bit better this time, after a 20-some year hiatus. And I had the great privilege of some of the best teachers of poetry and creative writing professors you can ever imagine. And they really brought something else out. So I think it's the moment. It was being indoors, shut in at a time when I think all of us were experiencing various ways of having to go deep inside and also deal with the world outside. And it was my way of processing my life up to that point, processing that moment, and trying to sort of imagine what the future might bring. So in some ways, the knack, I don't want to say a gift, I don't have a gift, the knack was already there. And then the classes helped me, and I took them for almost 3 years continuously. And I wrote. The way poetry classes and creative writing classes are, you create a body of work. So I kept creating a body of work. And it just helped coalesce a lot of these open strings in my head. So poetry requires structure and precision. And so the importance of language and what I had learned in the law really helped. It really requires you to have had some life experience if you're going to be talking about something that someone else will find remotely relatable, right? So it was good that I started writing. There are other poets who write fantastic poems in their 20s. I wasn't going to be one of them. So that helped.
Was it a way of you to verbalize your expressions, like just writing it down?
It was a way for me to process small t trauma, I would say, that I was not aware that I had experienced. I'm from a generation and by nature somebody who just barrels through and doesn't really stay in the moment to process sometimes. And all of that had got both personally, professionally, in the US, in Bangladesh, my family, my chosen family, the family I made, all our ups and downs, everything, you and your guests talk about. And all of that.
It was a form of therapy, just to get everything out.
To get everything out. And so the first few drafts were terrible but to then structure and shape it to something that someone else like you can read and say, I see a small part of me in there. This one's about me. This isn't about her, right? So that's sort of the connection, the interconnection. What does it do for me? I mean, the saddest part is that space closes when everything else is busy. So poetry is getting a space in your time and your mind. When life is busy, when work is busy, that muse for me goes away. But when I create time and space, I can't describe this feeling. It seems like time goes on forever. You are in somewhere else, like you're not on planet Earth. You're in some other reality, and that you will never die, like you're immortal. And all the poetry I've written, I kid you not, and my professors know this, are from somewhere else. They do not originate. Of course, I'm a scientific-minded person. They originate in my brain, but my brain is almost a tool for processing the transmission, the message. So
it's your creative way of expressing yourself. And that'll never stop.
As long as I make time for it. So right now, I'm more in the throes of finishing up editing this manuscript. So my brain isn't in that mode right now. And then someday it'll be, and I kid you not, I'll have to I have to go away, take some time, and then just write, because otherwise sort of all of these messages come in. Messages from myself to myself come in, and they need to get out of my system.
So why do you not make that time, even during your maybe lunch break or just 5-10 minutes of penning it down?
For me, there are others for whom it works that way. And then they can write a poem about their day or what happened before, what their kid did or their dog did or their neighbor did, right? And it'll be a beautiful poem. For me, it's not like that. It is truly inspired, so it really has to come, and it
From
comes when it
within.
comes. And when it comes, I can't stop it. And when it doesn't come, I can't make it happen. Like I can
Wow.
sit down and write an essay, but I won't be able to write a poem. And they come in bits and pieces. Like yesterday, I had the line. This is a line from the Quran that always comes back to me. It says, "I am closer to you than your jugular vein," and that's God speaking to us. I am closer to you
Yes.
than your jugular. And so I wanted to say, I'm closer to you than your jugular vein, or so God is supposed to say, but also death, right? Death is also as close to you as your jugular vein. And what am I going to do with that? I don't know, but it'll form a framework of a poem perhaps. So
And do you feel opportunity here is much more than it was when you came in the US?
I think it's a highly competitive landscape for poetry. And to be very, again, this is my experience, having read a lot of, you become a good poet by reading a lot of good poetry. And I've read so much, and it is so humbling to read works by people who are in their 20s, 30s. That is amazing, right? Like all of life and wisdom encompassed in these books. It is highly competitive, and what is expected from us is a little bit different. You know, diaspora narratives are expected to follow a particular arc. Loss, longing, assimilation, family. Family always plays a very important and supportive role. You cannot critique family. My poetry resists that tidy story because that's not my story. My losses are different. My wishing to belong is not to human beings, or my wish to belong is to belong to the universe, to animals, to plants, to things, not necessarily to people and places.
Have you read any poetry from Bangladeshi poet authors?
When I was growing up, a little bit, yes, and I'm trying to find contemporary ones, but often our aesthetic in our background and context is one of beauty and sort of linearity and resolution and the sounds, whereas mine isn't about any of those things. The beauty
But
is.
do you wonder that maybe if you want to publish in Bangla?
That is a great question. I would need somebody other than me to translate my work. So I have had my work translated into Urdu. So there is a poet, a really wonderful she's not a poet, sorry. She's amazing translator of very, very difficult pieces of work from Spanish to English to Urdu. And I happened to meet her, and she just put out a collection of contemporary American women poets in translation. My humble poems are now next to, the amazing well-published poets. And it was strange to hear. I don't read Urdu, I can understand it. It was strange to hear it being read. It seemed like somebody else's work altogether. And I imagine
Wow.
in Bengali, because it's not just translation of the words, that part's easy. It's the subtext that is very hard
Yeah.
to translate. So someday, I hope.
Yeah, I hope so too, because I think our language, Bangla, is, I think, one of the most beautiful languages in the world.
Oh, it would be amazing. But let me first get published in English. And then with the help of you and others, we're gonna find an amazing translator to work with me. And that could be the next phase. Nothing
It
would
would be amazing.
nothing would bring me greater joy.
Yeah. Now, if you could write a letter to your younger self, just arriving in the US, what would you say?
I would say hold on to yourself, hold on to your ground, but stay open. Don't close off. And learn from everything, everyone, even the worst things. But do not contort yourself into wanting to belong here in a particular way. The things I was unsure of, and I'm no longer, my accent, that question, where are you from? My weird love of all things weird, right? Like anything you can name that is weird and fascinating, I used to love and I still do. They'll be your strengths someday. So the things that set you apart and make you the odd one out is going to be your strength one day. And I would tell her, being different In many ways, you've identified some of the overt ways in which I'm different, and I've sort of tried to explain the covert ways in which I am really different. That being different, I'm a very warm and kind person. I'm a very curious person. These are going to be your superpowers, but being invisible is not your superpower. There are times, as you know, Nila, in life where you have to learn to be invisible. It's very, very hard for me. So that's something I have to teach myself. The other ones, they are my superpowers. So I wish my younger self knew those things.
That's great advice.
I know this has all been very serious. I'd say have that extra slice of pizza because you'll find out that you are gluten intolerant in a few years and you won't be able to have real pizza and real bread anymore. So have
No.
as much of that now as you can.
What would you give advice to a lot of like immigrant women? What advice would you give to these women that are going through so many things?
I don't know if I'm even equipped to give advice to people going through such difficult circumstances sometimes, right? As women, we are people who are always pulled in every direction. We are supposed to be everything to everybody and everyone in whatever way. I'm just right now reading this amazing book by called Covenant of Water, based in South India in the previous era. We see a 12-year-old becoming a woman and all the things that she is able to deal with, right? I know it's a fictional story, but real people go through that. Advice would I have to give to somebody like that? Nothing, right? Like I would be, you are inspiring. So that's what I would say. Don't forget that even in what you think is your maybe limited life or small life or a life without a lot of opportunities perhaps, your life is still yours. It's still amazing. Do whatever, even they can take everything away from you. They cannot take what's in your head, what's in your heart. So, hold on to that and make the most of that experience. So, someone else's life, I have this conversation with women in a prior generation. Sometimes they can't help but feel a little envious, a little regretful that they had to give up a lot of things so that people in our generations can fly basically. And I feel like saying, don't ever feel that way. Don't compare yourself to others. Do what you can in your own life. If you have a creative path, as you are trying to give me advice about that, and I appreciate it, make time for it. Make time for your imagination. Find the beauty in everyday small things. Because when you can, however your life looks to others from the outside as limited or constricted, to you, your life will be open and expansive. And it is possible, trust me, in every circumstance, from me to a person in a small village in Afghanistan. It is possible.
Yeah, that's inspiring. And one thing that resonated with me, don't be loyal to your work because that will come and go, but be loyal to yourself and love what you love to do. Be passionate about that because work will come and go.
Work is just a name we give to a thing that we have to do that for some of us in order to pay some of our bills.
Yeah,
That's
for all of us.
all that is. Is that your purpose? Is that your passion? Now, I feel incredibly lucky when my purpose, passion, and work align, right? Then, you're in the zone. Nothing can stop you. They don't even have to, don't tell anybody this, even though I'm alive. They don't even have to pay you to do it, right? But if it's not like that, that is such wise advice. Don't veer from your life's purpose. And don't see your life's purpose as a small p. See your life's purpose as capital P purpose. Again, if all of us tried a little bit, despite our bad circumstances sometimes, to feel that way, imagine what this world would be like.
I think a lot of people would be a lot happier. What advice would you give to our viewers, especially people who are listening to you today, Mir?
Give others grace and the benefit of the doubt. Give yourself grace. I love that. I didn't grow up in the tradition of grace. It's a Catholic concept, but it is an amazing concept. Just give others the benefit of the doubt. Try and see that they might be trying their best. And don't be driven by fear. Do not be driven by fear. Be driven by hope, however naive it feels sometimes, and do not be driven by fear.
You were excellent. You would be an idol to many who are going through so many circumstances, especially being a Muslim woman, being a double minority. You would be a voice of many that you got so many degrees at the same time. You have a creative background and you're taking time out for yourself. And you're resonating with so many people. I thank you for coming up because I know you're super busy.
I thank you for having me. And I want to say this thing that you just wonderfully summarized, it's in each and every one of us. All of us have that. So we just have to turn the key and try and find what's in common with all of us, right? All of those identities you define, they are my identities, but they do not define me. You know,
No.
I'm a human being, actually, an animal human being on this planet Earth, first and foremost. All of you are. So all of us are actually the same tribe. If we could only see that.
I know. Especially in this time. We're
Yes.
all the same.
I mean, I'm not, our outward differences matter, absolutely, but there is more in common than we actually acknowledge, right?
I agree. Thank you, Mir, for coming on. We thank our viewers for watching. She's been great. We'll have this podcast out. And Mir, if someone wants to get in touch with you, we'll put your email out. And if you need a lawyer in corporate in DC, reach out to her. And if you're in DC, also reach out. I think she's a lovely person to meet. I think she's inspirational
Thank
for
you.
so many.
And
know.
Nila, it takes one to know one. So I admire you and your work immensely. So thank you. I've never done that. Never started my own business. So there you go. You're an inspiration for me.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Mir, for coming on.
Bye.